Welcome at this first seminar out of the series Smart Cities. My name is Sandra Peters and I'm a project manager of the Smart City Innovation Space project. I'm quite nervous because this is my first online seminar, so I hope everything goes well. Next to me is Elke Vels. Elke, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Elke. I'm together with Sandra today host of the event. I'm the chief editor of IoTV. It's a stream platform that you are watching right now. It's a stream platform of Innovation Origins, and we usually stream about innovation and technology. And we are collaborating with the University of Eindhoven because we have the same mission, because we want to share interesting knowledge to a broader public. And I think the collaboration therefore. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about the event Smart Cities Innovation Space?
Yes, Smart City Innovation Space is a consortium of Eindhoven University of Technology Innovation Space and Innovation Lab, Brainport Smart District, Omnibus Internet Bureau, Technobroker, and the student teams, Team CASA and Team Virtue. And they have all the aim together to start a smart city learning community. And next to me, someone who also will be helping us today is Richard from Technobroker.
Good afternoon, Richard Bijler, Technobroker. My company, I'm helping out innovative companies to find sales channels and partners and so on. And today I will be monitoring the chat channels. So if you have any questions or remarks, I'll be happy to pass them through to these two presenters. Thanks.
Thank you. As a university program, the Smart City Innovation Space aims on students because they will become the architect of future smart cities. By bringing in expertise from the real world and challenges from government and companies, the Smart City Innovation Space project aims to accelerate the learning curve, so students will be ready to tackle problems in the modern world once they leave university.
Yeah, so this is my first time here on the university, and I've been to a lot of universities in my life, but well, this looks kind of different, especially this space around me. So in a lot of university, it's like exclusively so right in this place, in this university, that's not the case. So practical and theory they come together. I think that's really great.
Yeah, that's true, because Innovation Space really aims on challenge-based learning. We want to have students to tackle real-world problems, and that should be problems which all companies and government can ask us, and then students will try to solve them for them. And by doing this, they will learn. They will learn a great lot about technology, about cooperation.
So does it also mean that they build on prototypes?
They also do. They also create prototypes, and we already have experienced that a lot of student project teams have evolved by making a prototype to a startup.
Yeah.
And that's really something we're very proud of.
Yes.
Innovation Space and Innovation Lab are to accelerate that learning curve.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, and now we have this event. So can you maybe tell a little bit about this event?
Yes, because Smart City Innovation Space project had the idea of making smart cities more
like ethical?
Yeah, no. The first idea was we have to get more companies and government to bring challenges so students can also learn something about the theme smart cities, so they can't just choose for electrotechnic or mathematics or something.
Disciplines,
but they also should be able to choose a theme, and smart cities is one of the first themes where we thinking to set them up. And we wanted to have students to give them that chance to not just do something they're really great at, like physics or whatever, but also to evolve in something they really love in smart cities, automotive, whatever. But smart cities, it's a very broad subject. And to make it more understandable, we wanted to make small parts in it. So we wanted to talk about energy and about culture and health. And then suddenly Corona came along.
Yes.
Well, it happened in Ireland, all over the world. Corona came along, and it made us think and wonder if the things we really thought smart cities were supposed to be, like that they were supposed to help us to make life faster, make life even more and better. Of course, it should be like make life better, but is the better we thought first still the better we want to have now?
Yeah.
And that's we're exploring now in this seminar. Has the world really changed? Did it make change our point of view? What we really want into a smart city? What should it do? Should life be fast and more efficient? Or if you look, for example, at care robots. Before Corona, we thought a care robot, that could be a solution. It could help us with care. It's always lacking of good people who can job. And now we see the suffering of all the elderly people who don't have any social contact anymore in this period. And it really does make me wonder if we really want to make just the world faster, or just maybe we just also focus more on the human contact, and that's some kind of a basic right we want to have in the smart city. And that was something before Corona didn't consider yet.
Yes, and I think I see around me that people really question this. So, for example, there's a lot of video conference calling, and we do a lot on large distance. But you also see that for people, it's not enough. People also need to really connect with each other. And I think it's really good to have a discussion about this. And which way, if our cities are getting smarter and still connect to each other. And I think that's something we all question a little bit more now since this Corona crisis.
Yeah. Another point which we now really we always questioned is data security and privacy. These issues always were somehow on the agenda, but now Corona app is being developed in many countries. It really is fueling the discussion about it, because it's really, on the one hand, you don't want to infect anybody else. If you happen to have Corona, of course you want to know where you've been, with whom you've been in contact. 1% of the world population would want to do that. But on the other hand, I want to have some privacy. I don't want everybody to know that I've been to the same shop 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
Nobody needs to know.
Yeah. And nobody knows how to do these things. And I think that's why this event is really important, to just talk about it. And we don't need to have a solution for it, but it's really good to question it.
Yes, because this event really is, hopefully together with everybody who's viewing, a quest for what do we want in smart cities, which boundaries do we have to set, which values do we really think are important, because we don't have the solution. At least I don't know. Do you?
No, I don't.
So let's together search for what we really want to be in the future cities, and of course reach our colleague Richard by chat. And if after the event, or even now, you can reply on the email you got with the YouTube channel, and there you can give all your suggestions, ideas, your offering for help, whatever, and then maybe together we can figure it out, hopefully.
I think so. I hope so. So are we going to the first speaker of today?
Yes, I'm very interested.
All right.
Yes.
Well, our first speaker is Ignace. I hope I say it correctly, pronounce it correctly. He's a professor of philosophy, medical philosophy and ethics at the University of Ghent. He wrote several books regarding different aspects of philosophy, and one of his books was published in 2019. Which was called Doordenken over dooddoeners. And today he will talk more about whether Corona will change the way we are thinking. Also, talk more about the role of technology in society. Also with regarding this Corona virus. So he will give a lecture now. If you have any questions, please ask him because after the lecture he is able to answer them. So have fun watching.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and of course, thank you very much to the organizers of this conference, which is about, let's say, our post-corona era and the idea of smart cities. I can imagine if you look at my title, you think this is, well, a kind of awkward or at least odd title. My full title is Cassandra's Kiss, about the certainty of the future and the uncertainty of the past. And I will try to explain in my presentation why this title was so, let's say, suitable for my presentation and for this topic. I work at the University of Ghent in Belgium, and I'm a professor of philosophy of medicine and ethics. So let us start right away. I want to kind of question the, let's say, the presumption, the presupposition of this conference. Maybe this is due to my bad character, I don't know, but if I look at the amount of conferences which are now organized to, let's say, more or less predict how we will behave differently in the future, they're numerous. And in particular, it is interesting what the role of technology is in this discourse. And before I try to give an answer to the questions like, do we in fact, or will we in fact act differently in the future, I want to reflect upon the underlying presumptions that are mainly dominating the, let's say, the most of the conferences organized today. I think there are at least three underlying presumptions. First of all, the idea that we need to change and that therefore change will happen, which is not definitely the case, but this is one of the main presumptions that there will be a post-corona era, and in that era we will act differently because today what we do as human beings is not good enough or is even bad or terrible. Secondly, the future is called uncertain. And this is not only a matter of these conferences today, but this is what, if you look back upon history, this is what we did numerous times, is that if we think of the future, it is often called uncertain, and it can go in two directions. Either the future is considered to be a threat, and then technology is supposed to be the main threatening cause. Or on the other hand, it is seen as an opportunity, but then rather in a very optimistic way, as an opportunity to solve all of our problems, as if we have to make a choice in between these two. And then the third characteristic, or the third presumption, is that apparently we know for sure that the future will differ substantially from our times. This is also a very intriguing thought if you look at how, for instance, COVID-19 is framed today, is that so many people are focusing on the fact that we will do it in a different way than we did today and yesterday. And I could, of course, have made myself it easy and say, okay, I do agree. But I think it is worth investigating if these presumptions are actually true, if they're based upon facts, if there are good reasons to accept them or not. So that was the general introduction. If we look at COVID-19, I think we have to face the same story. I read a lot of papers and essays and opinion articles the last couple of months, and what they share is the idea that things will change. No matter how, but things will change. Everyone seems to agree on that. We will change the way we eat, the way we act in general, the way we move, the way we organize our daily lives, etc. And to mention only two examples, the Turkish writer Ahmet Altan, he talks about even a new type of human being, which would be more social and more helpful to others. I would love to see that happen, but I'm not sure if it will be the case. And then the second example is the Dutch historian Rutger Bregman, who talks about the end of liberalism and is apparently convinced of the fact that we face a new type of economy in the post-COVID-19 world. Now, if we dig deeper into these discourses and you look at the role of technology, again, technology plays the role of the good or the bad guy. I remind of discussions we had in many countries about apps or contact tracers or vaccines. There are a lot of complot theories about vaccines in the running on the internet. And technology is framed in a kind of ethical discourse, as if technology is either a good thing or a bad thing. And it is worth analyzing this a little bit more, because if we think of ethical frameworks in a post-corona world, where technology will play a substantial role, why the need of framing technology in these ethical concepts of good and bad? So my questions are, first of all, this is a general question, a question which I pose towards our culture in general. Why do we tend to believe the apocalyptic predictions about the destructive or revolutionary role of technology? Why is technology framed in that way? And there are numerous examples in our history. And if you look back upon them, we have to conclude that, well, I think all, or at least almost all of them, seem to have flaws. They were untrue. They predicted apocalypse, they predicted a wonderful future, and it was neither the one thing nor the other. But still, why do we believe change will happen? If you look at COVID-19 today, and everyone agrees upon the fact that if there's one thing we can be assured of, it is that change will happen. Why are we that convinced of the fact that it will happen? Firstly, and secondly, why do we think this change will either save us from the worst or lead us towards the best? So why the use of good or bad in relation of technology? And why do we think we will wake up in a different world, if it is tomorrow or the day after tomorrow? But apparently many people are convinced of that. I think if I'm convinced of the fact that we need to dig deeper into that presumption, it is by the hypothesis I want to share with you, is that we today seem to suffer from what I call an inverse Cassandra syndrome. An inverse Cassandra syndrome, that's a mouthful. And I want to explain, first of all, what Cassandra syndrome means. And secondly, of course, what then is an inverse syndrome. Now, Cassandra syndrome, you see the pic here in the middle of the slide. This is Cassandra. Now, who is Cassandra? Cassandra is the daughter. Well, literally, her name means she who confuses men. And Cassandra was the daughter of Priamus, which was a king of Troy, and of Queen Hecuba. And Cassandra was, as it always goes, so to say, in myth, she was a very beautiful young woman. And the god Apollo was so attracted by her that he asked her to marry him. And things went fast, so she agreed to marry him, but on one particular condition. And that condition was she wanted to be gifted by the capacity of prophecy, so the capability of predicting the future. And Apollo agrees, but at the very moment he wants to marry Cassandra, she refuses to keep her promise to him, so she does not longer want to get married with him. And Apollo, of course, is outrageous and wants to punish her. And he does that by spitting into her mouth at the moment she kisses him. And the spitting of his saliva into her mouth makes that her words get poisoned. And it means that she is still able to predict the future, but no one no longer believes her words. So she, for instance, predicted the fall of Troy and the Trojan horse who was put inside the walls of Troy, but no one believed her. So she's still able of seeing the future, but no one is actually listening to her. So the syndrome, the Cassandra syndrome, is not listening to prophecy that later on appears to be correct. Now, if I want to talk about an inverse Cassandra syndrome, it means that we tend to listen to prophecy that later on appears to be incorrect. And I think this is what we do a lot, not only today, but we did during our history. If you look, for instance, at the history of science fiction, where the idea of an apocalypse is really a central thought in so many stories, in science fiction, scientific innovation is either a threat or a means to enter paradise. But most of the time, our creation becomes our doom. Like we create robots, we create a machine, and the machine will dominate us. It will put us into a situation of misery. And technology is, in fact, the kind of trigger that makes things worse. So the message is human beings should not be too deeply involved into technology, or things will go wrong. Our relationship to technology is kind of a sort of warning, like, don't be convinced that technology will support you in one way or another. A couple of examples. I think that's from about a decade ago. Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. I put here a pic of iRobot, but well, one of the basic stories of the history of science fiction is Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. Another interesting movie is from Stanley Kubrick is 2001: A Space Odyssey, and time and again, technology is the agent that makes the world a destructive place to live. And so human beings have to, well, at least take care, because once technology is stepping up the scene, things will go wrong, definitely. So our inverse Cassandra syndrome, I think, stems a little bit from that history. The conviction that every prophecy someone tells us, especially if it is related to technology, we tend to believe it. We for some reason believe quite easily that technology either will save us from every kind of difficulty in our life, or that the end of mankind is nearby. So when technology pops up, we should be warned. And if you look at our history, it is predicted, it is, so to say, our history is stuffed with predictions of that kind. And if we want to understand why today our, let's say, the last couple of months and our prediction of what will happen by the end of next year or the years thereafter, the post-corona era, I think we can learn a lot from that history. What can we learn? Well, a kind of paradoxical underlying certainty in a discourse that predicts time and again an uncertain future. So the underlying certainty in the discourse on our so-called uncertain future is an interesting paradox, because at the surface, we cannot stop but talking about uncertainty. The future is called time and again uncertain, and the past is called certain. And I think it is the other way around. If we look at the, well, at least most of the predictions about our uncertain future, they never came out. So in fact, the past is really uncertain. It's pretty unsure if our ideas of the past can still count for today. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing is, if we keep on repeating time and again about an uncertain future, one has to conclude that we are pretty assured of the uncertain future. So in a way, while it seems at the surface of our discourse that we cannot stop but talking about uncertainty, in fact, we keep on holding on this certainty that the future will be uncertain and that there is a need for change. And my rather banal, but the banal questions are most of the time the most difficult ones, but my banal question is this the best model to start from? Well, think about Cassandra's kiss in the era of COVID-19. If we look at the reasoning, it is more or less the same reasoning. We are apparently convinced that only changes will help us. But the question is, if we really want to change things, we have to aware that change is already of our modern era. The German philosopher Peter Sloterdijk calls that modernity as the continuum of change. So if we really want to, I give a couple of examples, like starting from the Communist International, which talks about the world is about to change its foundation. If you think of the economic mantra of the ongoing need of innovation, I mean, if you want to get applause from your audience, just say you're innovative, and everyone agrees. So the idea that you need to change is everywhere. Also, it is quite present in psychological discourses about our identity. We as a person, we constantly need to grow. So this is a sort of common presumption, change is needed. But this confronts us with the second paradox. If we really want to break up with the way we live today, which is most of the time inspired by the idea that we have to change all the time. So if we really want to break up with that, we should for once not change anything, which leads us to the situation that things will stay the same. So you get in a sort of paradox, and it's not easy to get out of them. I think the second lesson we can learn from this pandemic is that although many people wrote about the message of the virus, I think a virus is a virus. It has no message. There is no messenger that calls us for, look, mankind, you acted in a very wrong way. You sickened up the climate, you destroyed yourself, you didn't take care about the others. No, it doesn't. A virus is no message from nature. A virus is a virus, and if we want to project a meaning in it, of course we can do that. But the question is, why are we doing it? And that made me think of the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, well, we love to hope that we learn from what happens or what goes wrong. because the other idea is that if we don't, is rather unbearable to ourselves. So we, in fact, tend to believe that we will change, because if we don't, it seems pretty unbearable to ourselves. Now, I wonder if this is the case with Corona. So no matter how many analyses are made about what will change, my simple question is, again, why would this necessarily be the case? Will we act in a completely different way? Question mark. Of course, things will change, that's evident. But at the fundamental level, will we no longer desire for love? Will economy indeed be broken up? I think that might be the case, but as it is today, there is no specific reason to accept that presumption. So to make some conclusions, and please don't misunderstand me, of course, some things will change. And evidently, if we can do things better, we should. But, and the but is threefold, if I may say. First of all, pleading for a change is not a new thing. It's rather old-fashioned. So if you really want to be innovative, you should stop pleading for change. Secondly, I think we should reflect more upon our imagination of, or that surrounds technology, because if you look at the discourse on technology today, it's like it is the shortest way to the apocalypse. And I think we should rectify, we should revise that. Technology is not a good or a bad thing. And if we can make use of ethical frameworks, of course, they can be helpful, they can be supportive in thinking how the post-corona world will look like. But ethical frameworks are, or it is better to develop ethical frameworks in normal times than during crisis. And during crisis, we are doing crisis management. We need ethics to anticipate to what happens to the world, not in the midst of what is actually going on. I think if we really want to be smart, we need to think our relation to technology. First of all, technology to me is not a good or a bad thing. It's about what we do with it. You can always abuse technology, but that doesn't mean that technology is a bad thing. So technology will not save us. It will not undermine us unless it is used in a dictatorship. Like if you look how, for instance, China is dealing with contact tracers in certain of its regions, that's a huge problem, of course. But if our cities will be smart, I think it will be up to us to embody these cities with democratic political structures and ethical debates about where we want to go. But these debates should at least try to involve as many people as we can. And maybe one a final thought that has to do with the status of philosophy. I think if we want to really deal with uncertainty, we have to step away from the unverified predictions and presumptions that our future will be at time and again uncertain or leads to one or another apocalypse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ignace. It was very interesting. And now, of course, Richard will answer some questions.
Yeah, thanks very much. We had a number of reactions on the YouTube chat channels. First of all, from Robin, and he asked Ignace, how uncertain are the politics in this landscape?
Well, I think they're pretty much uncertain in a way that we discovered today that politics is in need of more than people that are able to become popular and get votes. We also need politicians that are able to find solutions to huge and urgent problems. And I think what we face today is that some countries, or at least the politics of some countries, are really well prepared to that. But if you look at others, they miserably fail, because I think a whole generation of politicians was more busy becoming popular than looking after solutions for future problems.
Okay, thanks. Clear. A question from Niels, basically. Does the idea of the uncertain future also stem from the fact that most of the people no longer truly understand technology and the limitations now?
Well, my answer can only be a bit speculative because I really don't know how many people do not understand what technology is all about today. Of course, it's a challenge. And I can see that in all the areas I'm following related to my expertise. If you look at genetics, if you look at artificial intelligence, of course, I don't think it's only about it's hard to understand. I think it mainly has to do with the speeds by which it happens. And this speed is truly really high. So if a future seems to be uncertain, this is more to do, or this has more to do, I think, with a kind of try to resemble your world as it was and try to face the future. But if you really don't know how this future will look like, the uncertainty, of course, also increases.
Mm-hmm. Even for specialists in this case, huh?
Even for specialists, I think. If I only look at the area of genetics, for instance, which I'm pretty close to, if I stop reading for 3 weeks, I lost them. So it happens with such speed, and you have to be busy with it all the time. And I think we really need more public debate to try to involve as many people as possible in what we will face stemming from technology in the nearby future.
Okay. Continuing on that same subject, if we have a vaccine, if of course everybody's busy with the COVID-19 vaccines, but if you have that, what is your personal opinion? Do you think we will revert back to our pre-COVID behavior, or does things really change? Do things really have changed then?
I think if you look at daily behavior, I guess from the moment we have a safe and let's say verified vaccine, which is available for all people in an affordable way, then the chance that we will return to our pre-corona behavior is pretty high. If you look how people behave in the streets once the restaurants are open again, I see pretty much the same patterns as before. But of course, some things have changed in a way that we will in a way also be aware of what might happen, and that will make us at least parts of us or some of us that people will still be scared about what might happen. Next to that, if you look at societal structures, how these will change, I think it is inevitable that even if we have a vaccine, and it's still it's still one of the questions up to what level that vaccine will work, and will we have to have a new vaccination each year or not? So if there is a sort of threat that is maybe not manifest, but still in our heads, then I think our behavior will change. But it's not easy. I mean, people's behavior is one of the most stubborn things to change. So I think there should be some sort of warning or threat in our daily lives. And if not, we will return to former behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people consider this actually as a kind of reset button for society. Yeah, that's practical question also. As a reaction to your question, will change happen? The question was, should companies also change their future roadmaps?
Well, I hope they do. And I really think that let's say the companies who were already busy with that, they were stronger during the crisis. And I think the other ones will see, if you really don't look in the, let's say, in the short future, but in the long term, if you relate your company strategy to that and you look further than the next day, then I think we will see how we will make it, or at least we will see a division between companies who are really capable in facing unforeseen circumstances, and others who don't. They will disappear in a very short term. So the ones who already were involved with it might be a sort of leading examples to the other, and I really hope this will be the case.
Okay, so it's in any case a message to all the industries and the companies that are listening. Yeah? Take care of these kind of things. Yeah.
Please do.
Okay. Any more news, Sandra? You've looked at the chat channels?
Yes, we have another question. So why do you suggest that as many people as possible have to contribute to the ethical discussion? And how do you envision this?
Okay, thank you.
Well, I don't know if it's a question to you, but
Well,
please.
I think this is related to one of my first answers. I'm really convinced that if we think of, let's say, ethical debates on technology, or let's say societal debates on the future of technology, this should always be more than a discussion between experts. Of course, we need the experts, but if you want to involve the whole of society, or at least as many people as possible, we will try to, or at least we need to try to involve them in debates. And I think it is important to do that. If you want to hold on to democracy, it is crucial that you can involve the whole of society in that kind of debates. If not, we will have a small group who will still be able to understand what is going on, and the rest of society that will look, well, at least fall behind, who don't understand it, will be skeptic about the future. And I think the more you can prevent that, the better it will be for democracy as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that also really is something that I'm sorry, I hear myself twice. Is something which is our next speaker, and it's about the inclusive of society.
Yes, and I can tell you more about this. So the second speaker is Marius Mona. And Mona is the co-founder of the cooperative of Smart Sustainable Farming. And an organization that pushes the boundaries for smart sustainable farming. And indeed, he will talk about the in and exclusiveness of smart cities, because smart cities and technology, most of the people find it really awesome, all these new technologies, but there's also criticism that smart cities will be mainly a function for the rich people and excludes the poor people. Yeah. So that's a topic of debate, and he will tell you more about that. We will first see a video of him, and after that there's room for questions for you. So please, if you have any questions, share them in the YouTube chat, and he will answer them later.
Hello, my name is Marius Mona, and welcome to my presentation, What is the City but the People? Let me introduce myself. I graduated in business administration at the University of Groningen, and I've been working for the University of Eindhoven since '96. But last year, I co-founded the cooperative Smart Sustainable Farming, and that cooperative is aiming at accelerating the transition in sustainable agriculture with new technology. At the same time, I'm still connected to the Eindhoven University as a program developer, Agri-Food and Tech, for that thematic program. First, I'll talk about the resilience of cities through resilient people. Then about the need for resilience in these times of crises. Then about the societal change. How do we deal with these crises? And then some things about solutions that are developing for smart cities. And at the end, something about ethics in times of crisis. So resilient cities through resilient people. People might be inclined to look at cities through the lens of the tangible buildings and infrastructure and all the impressive things there. But in the end, these are only useful if they support the people that live there, to make the atmosphere there, to make the city thrive, to create the economic output there, and really to make it livable. And Before our corona crisis, the citizens of Aleppo showed it as no other. With their complete city in ruins, they showed the resilience to have a nice meal with their at sunset during the Ramadan, where they had a real nice iftar, a community meal with everybody there. So I think that's the best proof that people are the essence of the city. And we need that resilience because there are crises developing. We're in the corona crisis at this moment that is becoming less urgent, fortunately, but we don't know whether or when there will be a second wave, whether there will be mutations, whether there will be a COVID-20, 21, 22, and all the related economic hits that we will get from that because of lockdowns. And also there's something like climate change luring that could also have huge impact and disruptions. So how do we deal with that? This is the recent forecast from the OECD about what will happen to the economy of these OECD countries. Here you see the Netherlands. They forecast 8% decline of our economy with a single hit scenario and even a 10% with a double hit scenario. And there we're somewhere in the middle between all these other OECD countries. This will have huge impact with lots of unemployed, and let's hope that we can recover quickly. And at the same time, we know that we really need to reduce our CO2 emissions to be able to reach these goals or even those. But the longer we do different pledges and don't even get those, the steeper these lines need to be, and they will probably not be feasible anymore if they were feasible at all at this moment, because we've waited too long. We also see the Earth Overshoot Day moving more and more towards the beginning of the year. In the 1970s, it was only 23 December, and nowadays it is around August. And they expect it to be at the end of June in 2030. And it means that at that day, the Earth Overshoot Day, we have consumed more ecological resources than the Earth can regenerate. So, yeah, we're having a too big print. And it's not going in the right way. It's becoming worse. So some people believe that innovation will save the day, but when will we start the innovation? Because it's not stabilizing, it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And the same thing we see with the biomass of big animals. We're eating so much meat that 64% of that consists of livestock and only 9% of big wild animals like elephants and rhinoceros and what have you. And this is us, a minority. So you all know the Sustainable Development Goals, but I like this presentation by the Stockholm Resilience Center, where they say, yes, these are all important, but these are the most important because these provide the basis where we can thrive as a society and where we can have the economy to make it also financially sustainable what we're doing. But if this is not in order, then all these things will perish. So what can we do? The experts in transition, they usually use the X-curve, which shows that this is what business as usual is doing, making things more efficient and optimizing things. But at some point they become rigid and things get destabilized because it doesn't work very well anymore. The systems can't adjust very well to new developments. And then at some point a disruption comes, like what we have now with Corona. Efficiency cost reduction, rigidity, and lack of resilience. And now, because of Corona, we have a lockdown, and that means disruption for quite a few industries. But it also means that there are opportunities for other solutions that have already been developing. We could already start working from home. We have all the tools, all the digital things. Also, online education was already there. The technology was there to use, but we didn't see the necessity, so it wasn't used that much. But now, because of the lockdown, these things come in and step into this circle where things are uncertain. Things change. These things are in disruption and might further break down and phase out. These new options could move in and really become the new normal via institutionalization and stabilization. The same applies for cycling. In the Netherlands, we already did a lot of cycling, but in other countries, they really have taken up cycling in cities now as a good alternative to all these things with cars. And the same with the local food. Because of the disruption of global food supply chains, we now had to find different ways because of lockdown. And many local food providers now had the opportunity to sell their food directly to consumers in nearby cities and villages. But there are many transitions happening at the same time. So this shows that, again, the business as usual, this is now still the how things go, but they're declining. Things get more difficult and disrupted. And alternatives that are already well developed, they can step in, they can take over. As you saw with the online education and remote working technologies. At the same time, there are already alternatives that are still small niches. They can exist, but they're small. They don't have lots of consumers and users. But they take also a transition time that takes longer to really get to the strategic fit here for the things that are needed in the future. And this is going on, and that might fit with the challenges that we will have in the future, because these things help to get the economy going while we're fighting the recession. These things need to mature while we need to find out how we can deal with these climate changes. So it is important to see that these things continue and these in parallel to be prepared for different kinds of challenges that we will have in the future. But that's difficult because changes of behavior are difficult because we have our habits, but you see in the iceberg model, and these habits are mostly steered by our emotions. And as Daniel Kahneman in Thinking Fast and Slow showed, we're inclined to do everything with system 1, which works autonomously, automatically, unconsciously, very easy. But yeah, we can make mistakes there. And that's really related to this behavior. But as soon as things go wrong, they don't fit to the situation anymore, then we start to use this. This is effortful, so if we don't need to do it, we won't. But if we have to, then we can use it to figure out how to solve the problem that couldn't be solved with this. This is the system 2, the thinking layer. But many systemic changes are more than puzzle solving. What we do with this system 2, in many cases, we really need to change our values and beliefs. And those things go slowly. And they're also related to our social identity, our reference group. So even if we think differently from what is important and what our values are, we have the difficulty that we then might lose our social identity because our reference group thinks differently than we do. So not many people are inclined to change their beliefs and values more quickly than the people that are socially relevant to them. And that is what you see here in this Dutch research by Motive Action, when they classified different people in the Netherlands in different groups. And they also reclustered them related to sustainability. And then you see here people with a low, medium, and high status, socioeconomic status. And here you see the value, traditional, modern, and postmodern. So these people want to keep things as much as the way they are, business as usual. But people, so there are lots of people with a high status, but also people with a medium and lower status. These people, for them, it's easier to change their actions because they have enough money to make different choices. If you have not that much money, you really have to budget to get your basic needs, and you have less opportunities to change your behavior with your budget limits, but they can. But it is very difficult to have a discussion between these people and these, for instance, or here, these people, because they can't accept easily the values of these other groups because they would lose their peers if they would change their values towards these people. So the easiest way to get things going at the beginning that are looking forward to the future is to get things adopted by these people and then get the rest to take on afterwards. But it's only a small group, only 22%. But then the question is, where do you fit in to do these kind of things? As I said, some are in denial and hold on to the old ways, that's here, and others are taking incremental steps that scale up fast. That is more in this bit. And many of the statusbewuste, so the people who are more busy with status, if it's convenient, then they can also use these kind of things. And also if it helps them to get status among their peers, that if they're a bit more environmentally conscious and it gives them status, then they can also step in. But yeah, in the end, we need to get this moving. For you, where do you fit in? What is your position? You might have heard about the donut economics from Kate Raworth, where she also said the earth, within that we have society that takes living matter and materials and then puts out waste and matter, and that has to be in equilibrium. And within that we have the economy with the market and the state, but we might forget the household and the commons. And particularly this bit here is very interesting, where market and state, they don't deliver what progressive people expect, and then they start organizing themselves in commons or in societal enterprises to move faster towards this sustainable economy and society, and also to be more resilient towards the crises that might come. And maybe you've heard of Aaron Hurst. He's signaling that we move from agrarian to industrial to information, where it's about engagement and knowledge and curiosity, innovation, towards purpose. It's less about consuming and status, that what is still important here, but more about meaning and fulfillment. Purpose, and also be aware of the impact on the environment. More and more millennials are moving in this direction, so there's hope that with generational change, this will become new normal. What does it mean for smart cities? Well, what you see here is still the powers that be. Facebook and Apple and Amazon and Netflix and Google. They're busy with face recognition and they can provide Corona apps. And we'll find a way to deal with the issues about privacy. But we have all the solutions. So they were here, but they at the same time are doing these things already. This is their way to stay in business. And they can help here, but we need to pay attention about privacy, I think, because you already see that there are issues now already with the Corona crisis, where the people from certain ethnic groups, people of color, they run more risks health-wise. They have professions where they can more easily be infected with coronaviruses. They are more vulnerable in economic sense. And now you see that their tolerance for discrimination by police officers and other ways has gone, and you see worldwide protests against that. But at the same time, they're also very aware of profiling by the police and the technology by these big companies. So you see that Amazon then responds to really keep their license to operate. They ban the police use of facial recognition for a year. So let's see what happens then. And also IBM says that they won't work on that anymore. But it could also be interesting. How can we provide societal distancing without the downside? Could we provide immersive technologies for high quality virtual communication? Is it possible that we don't meet physically anymore, but we hardly notice the difference anymore because we don't need to talk to a flat screen, but we have emerging technologies where you hardly can tell the difference between physically with somebody else or virtually? Could that be possible? And if so, would that be a good solution? And on the other hand, could robotization help to replace the physical task where you could encounter people physically and then contract coronaviruses, like what in the slaughterhouses happened, and also in agriculture with seasonal Eastern European laborers. Could also have implications for work, particularly here, not here. So there is also an ethical question about what would that mean for opportunities for different groups. So could we move towards the holodeck, where you really have this immersive experience instead of talking to a screen, what I'm doing now? But it could also evolve into the Matrix, where you couldn't even tell what the difference is, and you're just exploited by these big companies or big governments, or a cooperation between companies and authoritative government. So what do we do there? And this is really a very interesting book by Shoshana Zuboff, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, and she warned for these developments, because we all know, if you are paying for the digital services, you're the customer. If you didn't pay, you were the product being sold. But nowadays, if you don't pay, your behavioral data are being sold, and you will be the abandoned carcass once they extracted enough data from you to train your algorithms. So we will be tossed away. You're completely irrelevant. So she's warning, these are my words, not, she's warning that surveillance capitalism is an assault on human autonomy. What began as advertising is now a threat to freedom and democracy. So how do we prevent that? So, and I think Europe has a responsibility here, between China with the authoritative approaches helped by these big tech companies, the USA that is moving towards the Chinese approach but in a different way and just give the free hand to the big companies, and Europe, where human dignity and privacy are still important. And at the same time, there are some alternatives being developed, but they're not really ready yet to be adopted by everybody, because they don't work that easily, like compared to what the big tech companies do. You probably have heard of Solid, this decentralized way of sharing your data instead of with these big cloud companies. And also the first startup based on Solid started all by Sir Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. And you also see data commons that want to prevent data extractivism. You see Decode in Amsterdam and Barcelona showing how that could be done. So there are things on the way, but in the meantime, we have these things with the big companies. So how do we deal with that? So then, ethics in times of crisis. So we have lots of ethicists, and it's really valuable that they curate the knowledge about timeless moral questions. They have a huge knowledge base that we can use. But every society, generation, organization, and individual has to find the appropriate answers for their situation, like we are now with all these new crises. And these crises then are the times when new answers to old questions are needed. We need to formulate them ourselves. And the big question then is, how do we get people to work together when they have different views on what is the right thing for our common good? And there you see these different social identities that could be a problem there, where you could use the diversity of all these different people to define new solutions, but the diversity could also mean division and separation and blockages to cooperation. How do we prevent that? And then the question is, what difference can you make? What difference can we all make? And what I really like about Gandhi, when he was asked one day by an interviewer, what do you think of Western civilization? And then his answer was, I think it would be a good idea. And it really makes me think, what are my values and beliefs about what Western civilization is? And why was I surprised when I heard this answer from Gandhi? Thank you.
Thank you, Marius. That was very interesting. Thank you very much. And we've got some questions in our chat. So, Richard, could you please ask the first question?
Yeah, Marius, you talked about that the start of innovation needs a reset. Don't you think that this COVID-19 situation is a firm reset that will do this?
Nee.
Marius?
At this point, we can't hear Marius yet, so we're trying to get the sound from Marius. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear his answer.
Okay.
Now you're back. Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
I was muted, so here I am.
No problem.
So the question was whether it would be a reset, COVID-19.
Firm reset. You talked about that start of innovation requires a firm reset, and COVID-19 is probably the firmest reset you can imagine.
Yeah. So I think it is, in a way, a firm reset, but it will only work for the things that were already ready for change. That will make the move to change things. I don't believe in a reset that all kinds of other things will suddenly stop. It is, as I described, there are some sectors that are really disrupted now by COVID and the lockdowns and all these things that come with it, and others will step in. all the other things will take more time. There will be no effect of some kind of reset. That's what I believe.
Okay, and what sectors do you think are ready for reset then?
Well, as I described, so you have the people who work with offices and the people who serve those offices with these remote working technologies, also with online education, with partially also what I'm really busy in with myself is these short chain logistics, where you really bring an alternative that is better for farmers and for the soil and for sustainability, and even for combat modern slavery. Even in Southern Europe, people are abused by paying too low salaries. So there are all kinds of effects there. But yeah, those move in, and all kinds of others. I'm not sure whether they will benefit already from the COVID-19 reset now.
Okay, talking about benefit, you also brought in your talk, excellent talk, the combination of the fact with COVID together with the whole climate discussion. Of course, there's a kind of cross fertilization, if I might say so. I mean, kind of combination of these two. What is your opinion on that? Does it influence each other?
Yes. So, but yeah. To really have an impact on these climate change issues, we need to have intermediate steps. So that's what I try to describe with these different paces of transition. So COVID-19 helps in a way, but it will take a longer time. And that's the difficulty, because we will have the risk of relapse. In a sense, we're kind of addicts. We all know how difficult it is to deal with an addiction, whether it is a small one with binge watching Netflix, or smoking, or alcohol, or some people even with soft drugs or hard drugs. It is very difficult to have the determination to change your behavior there. And I think as soon as the urgency is gone, like Ignace de Vis also said, then people will relapse very quickly to old behaviors. So it is really important to get in touch with the right main drivers, the values of people, and show that it works, and then others will step in.
Okay, and do you think that these kind of innovations, the time that it takes to maturity, is also shorter in these kind of times of crisis?
I can't tell yet, because otherwise I will have the same problem that Ignace warned for. It all depends. Can you repeat your question again?
Yeah, actually, I mean, like you see in, for example, in times of war, technology increases enormously, because everybody starts to find out all kind of nasty ways to kill each other, but the normal society benefits from that as well. In this case, you can imagine that there's also a crisis, so you get faster and sooner, you get mature solutions on the market that may be helpful afterwards as well. So the whole cycle of maturity will be shortened.
Going to maturity. In the case of war, a whole nation is united. And here we're maybe united now because of the strong urgency of the corona crisis now. But as soon as the economic crisis comes in, then maybe people are more inclined to forget about the other things that are needed for the climate change. So people might relapse.
Yeah, clear.
Okay. And I have one last question, because time is really running out. How about the inclusiveness of actually the poor echelons of our society in smart cities? How do you see that? Are they inclusive, not inclusive? Is it?
I think for the changes that are needed, if people have little options, budget-wise and other capabilities, then it is difficult to expect from them to change. So I think if we want to make new moves, like what I find very interesting in the transition with food, I really like what Hereboer is doing with this cooperative where consumers, they set up their own farm with own money. Yeah, people with little money can't do that. So people criticize those movements as being non-inclusive. And I think, yeah, but you can't turn it around. The car was not developed, factories were not developed by poorer people. These things that are really necessary for the transition towards climate change need to be done by people who have the opportunity, the money to do those kind of things, step in as first. The inclusiveness is probably just necessary by redistributing the money that we have.
So, or maybe a political decision.
Yes, that is, and that is a difficult one because, yeah, as Ignace de Vis also said, then we need the right politicians there. Let's hope that they have a better chance now. But they also are always in this window of Overton. They can only do what is popular.
Yeah. But we are the ones who decide what's popular because we are the ones with the vote. So
Exactly.
I think it's yes, I agree because we have to see what politics does. But once every 4 years, I'm also able to put the politician a bit towards the decisions to make. So I don't know. I do understand what you say, but I do get the idealistic urge to now shout out and say, well, but we have to think of smart cities as something we also want. How do we want to live in a smart city, and do we really want to be inclusive or exclusive? And maybe we have to do something now instead of just having things evolve, and then eventually in 20 years' time you get a society where there's a very drastic difference between the richer part and the people who have the better jobs, the white collar jobs, and the blue collar jobs, and the people who have actually no job at all, who are unemployed, and they're actually on the outskirts of society and lacking all the great technology the upper class has. And the question is, do we really want that?
Well, yeah, I don't want it, but the question is what the majority want. And I think it's what I really find very interesting, and that's also in the city and in the rural country, is that people collect money to buy ground, land that can be used outside the market in the urban area to build something for people with less money, where they can rent that without the fear of increasing rents all the time. Because if you look at the prices of buildings, they shouldn't be that high. There's markets that drive prices up. But if you just have secured the land and then build something for those people, then you can really secure it. And it's already happening, but not by companies, not by governments, but by civilians who organize themselves. And you see the same thing with agriculture, where you have Land van ons, where people invest there, where they don't want to have big profits, but they want to have social outputs, social impact.
Looking at the time, one more question, last question from YouTube that we got from Mandy Astola. You mentioned donut economics. Is this one of the changes that was ready to happen?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think that she's been working on that for quite a while, got more and more attention. She was a bit of an outlier in economics, but now she's at the center. And maybe you've heard or read that in Amsterdam, they're already applying that to their city. So it's no longer about the nation level, but really at city level donut economics. And maybe it's something for cities in Brabant as well, maybe for the Brainport Smart District.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And you mentioned before in your presentation, you discussed a bit about data and privacy. And well, that's what our speakers are about. So
Yeah, so I can introduce to you the last two speakers of today, and they're last but not least, Niels Keuntjes and Carlien Roding, and they will debate privacy and data. So Niels is the owner of Ominous, which is
Internet Bureau.
it's Internet Bureau Ominous, and which is an internet agency that focuses on web strategics and make online applications. And he has a quite practical viewpoint on data and privacy. So he says that there's a point that data is not your own anymore. And this may be in debate with or other guest of today, which is Carlien Roding, and she's a register accountant and works for Brainport Smart District. And she holds the viewpoint that people are owners of their own data, and that nobody else but yourself should decide on what to do with this data. So this might be quite an interesting debate with because they hold two, not totally, but different viewpoints. Yeah. So you will first see some videos from them, and after that there's room for questions. So please stay tuned for the next two guests.
Good afternoon, my name is Carlien Roding. I will do this presentation together with Niels Keuntjes. I'm working as a project lead on the topic of data governance in Brainport Smart District. Brainport Smart District is situated north of the Brandenvoort-Helmond railway line. We will hopefully start with building the first houses at the end of this year. My project, Data Governance, is part of the program line Digital District. And there are more program lines, as you can see, but you can find more detailed information about it on our. For this presentation, I would like to use the 5-layer model to explain what the digital infrastructure is all about. And this is a model that applies to the physical urban environment and not to online environments and what people do on social media, etc. It's all dedicated to the physical environment. We have 5 layers. 5 is the network that is underground, the cables that enables us to have Wi-Fi in our homes, for example. Then we have the layers 2, 3, and 4, the apps, the interface. These 3 layers make the urban data platform. And then we have the top layer, and that's for now important, that the top layer are the entry points, so that are the sensors collecting data. These sensors are being placed in the urban environment, and we want to have a lot of sensors because they will collect data and give us a lot of information. And we see that GDPR rules apply to public space, shared space, and the personal living environment. So there are a lot of rules already into existence that give us quite some guidance what we can do or cannot do within the area. And it's very important to understand that if the sensors being placed in a personal living environment, residents consent for this. So we don't do anything without consent. But there are still a lot of other questions that are not addressed by GDPR rules already. For example, what about private property that is shared with unknown visitors? Or what if a group of residents organize themselves and want to share their personal data with one service provider? And the question also arises, how can we monetize data? And can we separate the natural identity of a resident from the digital identity of a resident? So there are a lot of questions. One of the things I learned is that we no longer should talk about ownership of data, because then we remain within the existing legal and economic framework of thinking, and we need a more radical view. And one of these views is written down by Kevin Kelly in his data manifesto. He says data cannot be owned. And for me, the question is no longer who owns data, but the question is how can we reallocate the value of data. My last slide, never waste a good crisis, because we can learn quite some lessons from the COVID-19 app. One of the things that arose in the discussion was the way data can be stored, and there's consensus that we have to do it as decentralized as possible, for example on our mobile phones. We also have to make sure that the app is only being used for corona-related problems and only for this reason. And we also discussion with experts from different kinds of expertises is very necessary, because it's not about technology, it's about how technology will affect our behavior and the behavior of the residents in the district. So it needs a very broad discussion, and we want to implement an ethical team in Brainport Smart District, making sure that we have the right discussions.
Hello everyone, my name is Niels Keurentjes and I am the Managing Director and Lead Software Architect at Omines Full Service Internet Bureau in Eindhoven. Following up on Carlene's presentation on the business perspective, I'll dive into the technical caveats and practical issues arising from the idealistic requirements that society is putting on smart data processing systems. Omines is a highly technically oriented Internet Bureau in Eindhoven specialized in developing complex online applications. Specifically in the field of real-time smart data processing, we've gathered a lot of experience the past years. Over these past few years, we've built the Panflux platform for managing what's come to be known as smart data, and started collaborating with parties like Innovation Space and Brainport Smart District. Our goal is to lower the bar significantly in making smart technology accessible to all four elements of the quadruple helix, and lead the way in discovering how this new technology can fit into tomorrow's society. When policymakers discuss data gathering in general, it doesn't take long usually before you hear the idealistic sentence that everybody wants to hear. Every citizen should retain ownership of their own data. Apart from the numerous legal issues surrounding ownership of data, as pointed out before, this is hardly a realistic statement. First of all, most sensors have no ID whose data they are processing. A motion sensor just happily chirps away, keeping count of passing pedestrians. So does that +1 belong to that person? And secondly, usually it's not a sensor you control, or you may not even be aware of its existence. If a sensor in the sewers is scanning my toilet for medical data, how do I exercise my right to be forgotten on it? And to top it all, even if we think we know who's in the data, we're frequently plain wrong. After all, I do let guests use my toilet at my home. So perhaps we should just anonymize all data gathered in the public space then. But how are you going to anonymize something? If I assign a completely random identifier to a sensor readout, I won't know that the next values concerning the same person should get tagged identically. My dataset will therefore be worthless. Alternatively, one-way encryption, also known as hashing, of the private details could theoretically work, but that ignores the plain fact that encryption is by its very nature never permanently secure. It's at best currently technologically unfeasible to reverse. To this day, no encryption technology has proven perfect, and every algorithm is susceptible to the threat of faster computers and smarter cryptologists. Worst of all, there's this thing called re-identification, which is a very real thing. My 5-year-old daughter just loves the tabletop Guess Who game and is already quite proficient at deducing my secret identity with less than 5 basic questions. Given enough anonymous data, eventually the number of people matching it will decrease significantly, possibly even to 1 in the end. For computers with access to huge amounts of data, this task is completely trivial. So to sum it up, anonymization is a kludge, an accident waiting to happen. Maintaining ownership is impractical to plain impossible most of the time, and chain of trust technology is not applicable. The only really feasible solution might be just to trust governments or large private companies to handle all our private data. That may not be the best idea after all, judging from experience. Yeah. So in the end, we should be realistic and accept that technology cannot magically fix all the practical problems that exist in the area. And it won't anyway fix the ones that we're now seeing anytime soon. However, technology is a powerful facilitator, and it can alleviate a lot of the issues by providing solid authorization models and enabling the public to easily use it. It cannot replace governance. Especially when handling sensitive data, we as a society need to make sure capable and independent parties validate that proper care is taken. People have relied on banks and notaries to reliably take care of the most valuable possessions for centuries and still continue to do so today. So those handling today's valuables on behalf of others, specifically their data and their privacy, should be open and welcoming to scrutiny and accountability. Thank you all for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Accept that technology.
Thank you very much, Caroline and Niels. That was really interesting to see, because on one hand, you have the very idealistic idea from Brainport Smart District, who wants to make data only yours, and you are the only one who can decide. On the other hand, we have Niels, who said it's just practical, very difficult to do so. So, well, in the chat, we have some questions about this.
Yeah, first one question to Caroline, basically. Can you tell a little bit more about the ethical team that you're setting up at BSD? Who will be in it? What are the responsibilities, and how much power do they have in decision making?
Yes, I can. At the moment, we are still in the process of decision making about what kind of what person will we ask to have place in this ethical team. But we are looking for a broad team with all kinds of expertise. For example, if you want to have an app like Corona that is surveying people, you know that if people know that they are being surveyed, they will behave differently. So it's not only a technical solution you are looking at, it's also about behavioral science, etc. And so we have no concrete names yet, but we are this week we have a meeting of our board of the foundation, Brainport Smart District, and we will come up with some names at the end of the summer. And it will be an advisory committee, so it's not the committee, it's not the board itself. They will advise the board, but they will have a lot of freedom to give advice. Also, even if they are not asked for advice, they are allowed to give advice on their own. And they really should, in Dutch we would say the luis in de pels. I don't know the English translation for it, but they really should tickle our foundation and to make sure that we have the right discussions.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks very much. Niels, question for you. Doesn't the problem partly resolve itself? I mean, data probably loses its sensitive nature over time. So if it takes long enough to decipher or crack some kind of encryption, we're still doing fine. That was one of the remarks. Your comments on that, please.
The problem is that re-identification will only become a bigger problem as we start collecting more data. If I just have a single motion sensor detecting that someone is walking in front of it, then it will not quickly disclose data. But once I start adding all of the data together, and we're gathering more and more, especially in the public space, you suddenly get all of these extra scenarios where you can add up that, hey, my license plate of my car was already scanned at the parking lot. So you can know that I am the person in the building passing the motion sensor. And so the motion sensor doesn't know who I am, but combining the data, you can still see that it must have been me because I was the only one in the building. So the more data that we get, the more data processing power we get, the bigger the problem gets.
Yeah. Is it also a possibility to prevent data to get connected? Because that's what I understand.
It's part of the problem and part of the solution. Part of the problem, and now I'm stepping out of my technical background. As a programmer, I like to connect all data because it empowers, it creates new possibilities and new solutions. The danger is, of course, just as obvious that when governments start combining lots of data, they suddenly can start doing scary things with that, with regards to my property and verifying things. But the not connecting it at all would be like shutting down the internet because people are abusing it. There are still a lot of good things happening on the internet.
Yeah, no, maybe.
Maybe Sandra can look at the latest chat that comes in.
Yeah. What kind of technology solution do you think can collectively encompass the challenges society with data sharing, connecting ownership, and legal aspects?
In the same vein, how do you expect citizens to use such technologies? Okay, I see it now also. Yeah. So
okay, maybe I can reflect on the second question. Because we can't expect citizens and residents to do it on their own. And of course, there will always be some residents that are very interested in these kind of topics, and maybe they have a career in IT related field. But for the majority of people, things will not happen without we offering them some training and education. But that's really also part of what we are doing in Brainport Smart District. It's not only about putting the technology into place, but also think about how can we in co-creation with the residents themselves make sure that we do have solutions that are really have value for them, and it's not technology driven.
Okay.
Yeah.
And regarding the first part, as a society, we've moved too fast over the past 40 to 50 years, where in the 1960s and the 1970s, when computer technology started emerging, we had a lot of problems, and we were trying to get the technology there so that it could solve it. So the technology was for long trailing behind what society wanted it to do. And by now, we've come to the scary point where we've come to the scary point where technology has outpaced society. We can do so many more things that we haven't even realized we wanted. We don't even know that we may want. So we're a fast evolving field, and we're going to experiment. Society of the tech world is going to experiment up to a certain point where, okay, if we do this, will people love it or hate it or want it abolished? Do they want new laws to be put in place against what we're doing here? Or should we get laws to make mandatory what we're doing here? We don't really know. We're trying things and sort of seeing what sticks.
Yeah. True, but isn't there also the danger of you? Well, I'm saying you, but technical people great options, and then there is a clever company who puts a good business case underneath it, and then eventually we'll end up with some kind of Facebook-like horror thing, which is very hard to control. That there is a business case and someone knows very well how to get lots of money out of it, like Facebook, and then eventually Mark Zuckerberg is hard to control, and even EU and US governments are trying to restrict his power to just use our information, and then but yet they still fail to do so. Isn't that also a problem of, or at least a risk?
It's a potentially huge problem. It's a problem that is as old as humanity. We've had the oil industry, and before that we had wood industry, and a lot of different branches have exerted control over society in an excessive way. And the oil of the 21st century is information. He who controls the information controls the world. And one of the biggest companies in the world regarding that is not even specifically Facebook, but Google. And Google, yes, there have been talks for years to mandate splitting them up in the US because they've simply become too powerful. And yes, I think that is going to cause a lot of social debate on who in the end is going to control all that information. I neither trust big corporations nor governments with that.
Can I add something to this? In my presentation, I mentioned Kevin Kelly and his data manifesto. What we see in the current legal and economic framework, that Facebook owns the data more or less. They are collecting from. But if you start thinking outside the existing framework and you say data cannot be owned, but it's part of the commons, and like the air, no one is the owner of the air, but every industry, every organization has a responsibility. We cannot pollute the air. We have to be responsible for that. And if you take this kind of thinking into the discussion, maybe you can also challenge the idea or the problem you are mentioning, that organizations are too powerful.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice option to explore as well. Do we have any more questions, Richard?
No, thanks.
No. Well, thank you all very much. And now we are going to the questions for all of us now. Ja.
Ja, ik heb eigenlijk ook een vraag.
Okay. I'm really curious. Ignace, you mentioned that, well, it's quite possible the world won't change actually after this, in a year's time when we are post-corona, and it will be about the same. How do you see then that the climate change will be like the next speaker, Marius Mone, was talking about? Will that be somehow pushed or influenced by the corona?
Well, at least I hope so, of course. I'm not saying that anything won't change. I'm just saying that change is a hard thing to do. And the moment things become regular, we start to fall back upon our former patterns. The problem is that during a crisis, we promise ourselves that after the crisis, things will change. But after the crisis, politicians are telling us that they ran out of money, which will be the case this time again. Yeah. Now we spend money that we didn't even own. So the first message will be, we don't have any money anymore. And then you know that if you talk about climate change, this is, or at least in most countries, this has never been on top of the list of priorities, unfortunately. And I would very love to see it just let's say the other way around, while the corona crisis was, let's say, in the midst of the crisis, so many people said we should anticipate to what might have become reality. So we should value the ideal of prevention. And then we promised ourselves that we would never do the same again as we did today. But if you look at climate change, the only behavior, or at least our most dominant behavior in that area, is that we only start to act when it is already too late. So the question is not when will we start acting, the question is how much will it be too late before we start acting. And of course, my ideal in dealing with climate change is just the opposite, but it's hard to convince politicians on doing that because many politicians are busy with how to get reelected, and they know how to do that, but apparently none of them knows how to solve climate change, or at least make a combination of getting reelected to solve climate problems.
Yeah, true.
Thank you, Dominique. All right. Well, I have one question myself. So personally, I also think that maybe it's also just like, it feels like it's just a tendency of people to act when it's almost too late. Do you see that in the same way, or?
I'm sorry, was that a question to me?
Yeah, that was a question to you, yes.
Because I didn't understand the last part. Could you repeat it? Thank you.
Yeah, I said to me it also feels like it's like a tendency of humans, or maybe in a lot of like restorations of humans to act when they feel like it's really relevant. So, and not earlier than that. Do you see that in the same way?
I think this is indeed the case. And that's the problem with climate change, although it has changed today that we really face it as it is. But if you ask people to get busy with things that might change in the far future, they won't put on a list of priorities. They will be occupied with the fact that my food for this evening, how to take care of my children, and maybe how to get a new job next year. But the long-term perspective is really hard to get that, let's say, as a sort of pattern into our thoughts. And I'm not saying this is impossible, once more, but it's harder to ask people to change their behavior, not because something else will differ tomorrow, but because it will differ in 40 years' time, or even 30, or even 20 years. That's already a huge chance to take.
Yes, I think so too. Yeah. All right. Are there other questions? Do any of the speakers?
No, I don't have any additional stuff from the chat channels, so not at the moment.
Okay.
All right. Well, then if there are no further questions, I think it's time to wrap up.
Yes.
So I first want to thank you all for watching. I think it was really interesting. Thank you so much for all the guests that were invited to speak, and for the interesting discussions. I think everyone can learn from that. So this was one of the seminars, but there will be come more seminars, right?
Yes, there will be more. This was our first one in the series of smart cities, and this one was about the ethical framework, and we're not done by this. It's just the start of the ethical framework. And after that, we will be talking about healthcare, energy, food, transport. And in autumn, we'll have our next seminar, and it will be broadcasted on all our social media. So if you're interested, please tune in. We'd love to have you for next time. But for this time now, if you have any questions, remarks, ideas, whatever, please let me know just by replying to the email you received with the link to this event. And I also would like to end with thanking everybody, but for starters, of course, Innovation Origins and Elke also very much for helping us and enabling this. I'd like to thank Hidde Tangerman for the text. Of course, very much thanks to all our speakers, Ignaat Davish, Marius Mone, Niels Keurentjes, and Carlien Roding. And I'd like to thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much. And I do hope to get a lot of reactions from you. So thank you, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.